Hey everybody. So my theory is social cognitive career theory, and my career issue is mobility issues within a mechanical engineering field. So let's get into first the theory, just in case you guys want to get your chart filled out right away. You can cover that before I get into my client. So some history about the theory. It was developed by Robert Lent, Stephen Brown, and Gail Hackett in the mid-90s. So it's a fairly recent theory, and it combines a bunch of the ones that we've already covered, specifically developmental theories. But it looks at someone's interests, their abilities, their values, and their environmental factors. So really, it's a combination of all of the theories we've kind of covered thus far. And it is based on Albert Bandura's general social cognitive theory, but it is expanded upon. So the theory itself connects three interrelated aspects of career development. This is how career interests are developed, how choices are made based on for your career, and how success is obtained. So as you can tell by this, it's pretty easy to use motivational interviewing when talking about a client's career strengths and weaknesses and things that are going well, things that are not. But we'll get more into that when I cover what we talked about in the interview. So this is just a visual kind of what the theory is combining. As you can see, it's reciprocal because the arrows are going both ways. So there's behavioral determinants, environmental determinants, and personal determinants. Primarily for my interview, I focused on personal determinants, just to make it more of like a therapeutic thing. But this theory claims that all three of these have like an equal part in how career decisions are made and perceived. So it's important to know the four models of SCCT. The first is the interest model, and we kind of got into this about how choices are developed, how interests are made. And this is generated from, so when you play with something, you get feedback on it. And if someone says, oh, great job, and you perceive that as a good thing, you're likely going to grow more interest in it. But even someone could say, oh, good job, and you could perceive them as maybe being sarcastic or something, so then you would lower your interest in it. So it's saying how that feedback affects someone's perception of the thing that they may or may not have interest in. Then we move on to the choice model, and this changes as your interests change and viability changes, which means that your career choices are an ongoing developmental process. Because different interests and viability reasons come and go, it's only natural that the choices we make about our career also change. Going into the performance model, this is going back to what I was saying about how success is perceived and recognized. And this is especially important in leadership positions for management, and usually has a lot to do with discourse and people wanting to leave their jobs. So it's the influences and results of one's performance. So obviously the influence of your performance are related to your interest in that thing that you need to perform. So all of these are still interconnected. And the last one is the satisfaction model. And this is this experience of overall and occupational well-being. So these are the four models that are considered to matter when it comes to how people perceive their careers and how career decisions are made. And this can also be applied to education as well. That's important to know. So let's get into my client. My client, I'm going to call him M. He is a 27-year-old straight cisgendered male. He considers himself white, non-Hispanic, and of American descent. He practices Buddhism. He identifies as working class, and he does not have any disabilities, either at birth nor through time, or an indigenous heritage. Right now, he is working as an electrical technician, and his next goal is to move on to a mechatronics engineer. It's really exciting. He actually got onto his second round interview for that mechatronics engineer position since his electrical technician contract is ending. However, the kind of issue he's having is that the mechatronics engineer position is still a contract position. And this is kind of common for people in technical fields, that they get contracts instead of full-time, like in-house in the team hired by the company versus contracted out by the company for a contracting house. So that kind of makes things a little difficult. But let's talk about where he's been. So he has gotten his associates in mechatronics engineering technology, as well as his bachelor's in physics engineering. So he has 2 degrees. While he was getting his bachelor's, he was a process controls intern at one of the biggest battery plants in the country, which means that he had to look at the code if there were any errors in the machinery and see if the code was responsible for those errors. When I asked him about, I was like, did you have an internship, when I was asking about his job history, and he said, does that matter? And I said, yeah, absolutely, that matters. So I thought that was something interesting that I wanted to know, especially because when I asked him which of the jobs he's had so far relates most to the job he wants, he said that it was his internship. So that then I re-emphasized, well, see, your internship was important. It does matter. So I think that that might just be something that we need to point out and stress to clients, that any bit of experience matters. And I'll get more into his non-machinist automation field experience as well. But he was then an automation engineer, so he did drafting and design for a company, and now he is working as that electrical technician with the Future Technology Research and Development team, which he really, really likes because it combines his values on politics and like social justice and everything like that. But when asked if he would want to go back to school to get into politics or history, like if he could start over again, would he go into those things? He said no, he just likes them as hobbies. And he said that if he had to restart again, he would go into the same thing. So these are some questions that I asked him, because the interventions for this theory are to ask about blockages, what motivates that person, how they make their decisions, any barriers that might be in their way to making those decisions. So it's a lot of MI stuff. It was a lot about, and how do you make your decisions and why? And just kind of honing in and digging deeper, all of those foundational therapeutic techniques. So specifically, I got into how he makes his career decisions, because that's the biggest aspect of this theory, right? And he says finances are definitely a consideration, because he wants to have enough money to support himself and his family as needed. And then he makes the decision, and then he seeks support on that decision from his father. He said that his father is his biggest role model, and he goes to him for a lot of his decisions, but not necessarily to help him make the decision, but to reinforce the choice that he made already, which I thought that was really cool. So he has a lot of self-efficacy, which is another huge part of this theory, is we're really trying to promote self-efficacy with our clients. We want them to feel that they have the ability to make the changes they want for their career. And we want them to feel capable of doing so. So if they don't already have the tools that we can highlight for them, then we are supposed to get those tools for them to increase their self-efficacy. Again, he said that his father was his biggest support. And let's go back to the job that he is wanting to get. He also, when I asked him about where he might want to go next, very important question to ask if you're using this theory, he said that he wants to do the mechatronics engineering position, and then he might go to school to get his master's in business, and then get hired as a senior engineer, like within the company, instead of a contract position. So that's kind of his thing now. What I perceive to be his career difficulty that was going on at the moment was some mobility issues, because as you see, he went from engineer to a tech to wanting to go to engineer again. And when I asked him, is that an issue? He was like, no, I don't see it as moving down or moving up. They're not linear because they all stand on their own. So I thought that that was a really cool perspective that he had. He said there's good and bad about all of them. There's things I learned from all of them, and they all stand on their own. To me, it's not stepping up, stepping down, which I thought was cool. I also wanted to highlight that before he got into this field, was working in the food service industry as a cook for many, many years. And he said that his work ethic, the way that he has to prioritize multiple things at once, dealing with the pressure and the attention to detail are all things that he learned in his food service job that he applies every single day to the job he has now. So I thought that was a really cool thing that I could kind of refer back to and look at all the tools he has to do this job successfully. And we went into the barriers, how he makes his decisions, why that's important to him. And the last thing I want to mention about my client is that I asked him what impact does his family have on the way he views himself and the decisions he makes. And he said that family is the most important thing above all else. However, it doesn't affect how he sees his career self. Those are separate things. So it's interesting for my client that, going back to the model of this, that how he views himself and the environment kind of has something to do with each other, but also not. So it's going into that back and forth. It's going into this overlap. And yeah, I think that's all I have to say. If you guys have any questions, feel free to email me. I'm available whenever, and I hope you have a great one.